Today we are going back to basics. We're going to be making a full 6 foot by 4 foot gaming board suitable for any war game you choose, and we're going to be doing it on the massive budget of under $100.
That's right, components and materials are getting more and more expensive, and not everyone has a big YouTube studio full of stuff that they can use. So we're going to make it a bit more affordable, approachable, and of course, fun.
But we're setting ourselves the challenge of doing this in just a couple of hours, so we can show you guys just how much you can achieve in just a short amount of time.
That's right, we have a huge amount of work to do today, so let's get started.
It's tabletop time.
So we make lots of boards on the channel, but we wanted to make something that had a lot of use cases. So that means making a board that can be used for the most games possible. So we're gonna make a moon board. It could be a barren moon in an alien world for a sci-fi game, or it could just be a desolate and strange place in the mortal realms for Age of Sigmar or something like that. It means grays, moon rocks, craters, and it should be really nice and simple for you to follow along at home.
So if we're gonna get started, we need materials. Let's go to the hardware store. Murray, away, away. Is it that one right there that's out of stock?
No, it actually isn't, thank God.
They've discontinued the thing we usually use, and now we have to get a giant sheet cut up, which they need to get a forklift to get. So, you know, drama or something.
We can milk that, I'm sure.
Place and my passion, forklift simulator. Okay, so we're back from the hardware store, and it's time to get some things gluing. And to do that, I'm gonna use some instant nails. Now, most people will have some instant nails in their garage. If you don't, the tubes are like $5. So I'm focusing all of my glue to the outside of this board, and I'm leaving a run down the center. And that's because I'm going to be doing a ravine cut into the center of the board, and it's actually really hard to remove the foam again once the glue is set. So we're just gonna ignore that bit. Just using some clamps. No, we're not adding the clamps to the budget. If you don't have clamps at home, you can use some heavy items like books or something like that to weigh it down. Clamps are just nice as they allow you to apply even pressure across the whole thing. But again, super easy to substitute in with just heavy objects. While that one is drying, we actually had 2 boards already ready to go. These were at my house. So we're gonna use these. We are gonna factor in the cost of the foam and the cost of the MDF into the budget of this build, but they're already set, dry, and ready to go, which is gonna save us a little bit of time.
Hey. Well, I guess this is mine now. I might do some craters. That's a really cool idea. Let's go. So I'm gonna start off with one of the more simple structures. I'm gonna make some craters. And to do this, I've just created, good one. I've just made basically some donut shapes. That's gonna be my rough outline. And then I'm just gonna cut it out. All right, I have my vague shape. So now it's time to make it a bit more interesting. So to do that, I'm just gonna cut in a wedge and just cut out like that. Making sure that I'm always going in a line towards the center of the crater. So just like that. I'm just gonna make my way around the crater. Cool. And just like that, we've got a pretty cool crater. Hell yeah.
Okay. Okay, my board is dry enough. I want to make a big ravine down the middle of it. Now, it's important when doing elements like this to think about the playability of the board. We did this with the Titan board, and we also had a few ways to ford that gap. So I'm going to be thinking about that later. I'm not going to make this ravine too big, but I do want to make one. And to do that, I'm going to try getting a bit primitive. Why can't I just use a chisel? It's fairly fast and fairly effective, and gets a bit of anger out. So why not use a chisel? Keeps a rough appearance, and it avoids me trying to like scrape repeatedly, which it kind of pulls and bunches up and looks terrible. This might do the same thing, but hey, I'm having fun doing it, so that's what matters, right?
One thing I like to do with my modular tiles though is ensure that if I were to cut this in half, which we plan on doing, I could flip these around and have the chasm kind of connected at the center. So that means I need to measure from either end and just make sure that the chasm will match up if I were to flip it around. And I've done that, so it's time to do a little bit more chiseling. Just a little baby bit more chiseling.
So we're going to talk about what I'm going to do for the board, and I'm doing something a little bit different to the boys. So I'm going to try and make some tiny little crystals to put onto the board and create these little like death pits, I guess. How am I going to do that? Well, I've got a bunch of glue sticks. So before I actually did this for my Turnip 28 guys, I used bits of sprue to cut and make crystals and stuck them on top of their heads. But this time I need them to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to use these glue sticks to create something that looks a bit like this. So I'm going to make up a bunch of these in little clusters, and then we'll move on to the next step, but I've got a lot of cutting to do, so let's get started.
Alright, my next thing is that I'm going to make some fairly large, tall, impossible terrain pieces, basically some spires or cans. So to do that, I'm just going to take some of the scrap from our board and cut it into small pieces like this. So it looks like a gem or something. And I'm gonna stack them and I'll end up with something like this. Isn't that cool?
All right, so the crevasses are done in my board, and what I want to do is make sure this can be used for all games, whether it's Star Wars Legion, Warhammer 40k, Stargrave, Frostgrave, Age of Sigmar, it doesn't matter. So we need to keep it kind of generic. It's a Strange Realm or Ashy board, but those kinds of wargaming boards also need terrain. Most wargames have terrain placement, so I want to make some really nice platforms or foundations for buildings. So for example, if we were to put this horrifying Nurgle bunker on the board, we'd have a nice spot to sit, and we wouldn't have to worry about any rocks or sand that we use in the basin getting in the way. Now, doing this is super easy at home. You can just find some bits like cardboard boxes and unfold them, and it'll just ensure you have a nice different texture and a little raised platform. If you do a lot of hobby, you can also have scrap pieces of MDF like this. They can often come in MDF kits. You could also use plastic sprue that comes in some of the boxes as well. All these kinds of spare offcuts can be really useful in just throwing onto your board and greebling them up. So I'm gonna do that, make a couple of platforms to put some buildings on, and then we can start thinking about texturing this board. Okay, let's take a break from the hustle and bustle of building this board for me to very briefly tell you about something super important to Tabletop Time. We are about to be launching our second ever Kickstarter for the Kindred of the Abyss, an awesome range of miniatures designed by me and the team here, drawn by Alicia and sculpted by Jackson Jewell from Golden Dragon Games. These are a group of horrible underwater themed dive suits and human scale gribblies that we think are going to be amazing on all of your gaming tables for whatever game you play. Supporting this Kickstarter is going to be a massive help to the future of Tabletop Time, and it will be going live very soon. So please check out the links in the description and click that follow me button to get notified when it launches, and you can check out the full details of the campaign. If this campaign's a success, it means the start of a brand new miniatures universe by us, which is awesome.
So I've made up all my tiny little crystals and they look so good. I'm so happy with them. But I've got a few more steps I need to do with these. First off being, I actually need to put them in some boiling water, and that is going to do this. So when I put these in hot water, it kind of helps with the opacity. It makes them a bit more like crystals, which is really cool. It also softens them down a little bit. Now, I am going to paint these in the end, so the color doesn't matter too much, but if you're thinking about making your own crystals, this is a pretty handy tip, and I think it's worth doing 100%. So I've got to dunk all of these in hot water, get them out, and then we get to move on to painting.
It is time to turn my 2x4 into two 2x2s. This is my favorite modular way of playing with gaming tables. This reminds me of my childhood. It's how we used to do it. Basically, you have 6 tiles. You can rotate them however you want. You can swap their positions, and it means every time you play, you can have a completely different setup. It also means that they're much easier to store, but to do it, you need to get some power tools. Cool. Isn't that well done? Pro tip, don't glue stuff on beforehand. Basically, just don't do anything as badly as I do things. Like that. Maybe don't film this. It's like 2 parallel cuts going in opposite direction. And cut it like that. Mari's not gonna let me hear the end of this. You guys just do something else.
For structural rigidity, we're making into sort of like an interlocking jigsaw piece, all right?
Cut all this from the video.
This feels like a bad idea then.
It's not gonna work. We can, I'm telling you, we can salvage this. It'll be fine. Okay, I made some pretty stupid errors there because I was rushing. I should have flipped the boards over and cut them the other way, and basically then had to try and fix up the wonkiness of the cut, which I've done. It does mean I'm just gonna have to fill the board, and then you can use foam or anything like that. It's unfortunate. Really good example of why rushing can lead into some issues, but it'll be fine. When it's all done, you're not even gonna be able to tell. You watch. Murray, do we need to go on to the time you cut a table in half? Let's not.
Hey, all right. For my final part in all these little additions, I'm going to be making sort of hills in the corners of some of the boards. I don't want to just like make your standard Games Workshop terrain hill that just all sit somewhere. I want this to be designed to sit in the corner of the actual table quarter. So I'm going to start cutting this out and just sort of start angling bits of the foam to get that nice leaning tilt.
So this is my lovely board. I have used the chisel that Dave has used before to make my chasms, and I've made 3 of them. So all of the crystals are gonna go in there. I also made some cracks that are going along the board, and I thought this could be really cool to do some like glowing effects so that like the crystals are glowing and it's all happening around the board. Also, Murray gave me one of these, which is very nice as well. So thank you, Murray, for giving me some stuff from my board. I appreciate it. Also cut it in half as well, so that's done. So all we gotta do now is put some texture on it and let that dry. So time to get messy.
What I'm using, bit of sawdust, bit of sand, PVA glue, and then some paint. Now, cheap poster paint, acrylic paint like this, you can get a huge bottle of it for like $10. But the one secret ingredient we often use is masonry powders, and you can get these at hardware stores. We always have bags of these sitting in the warehouse, and they're really good for working with craft projects and terrain boards. Again, a huge amount of pigment, really cheap for the amount you have to use. I'm gonna combine all of these in a bowl, try and make a little bit of a space gray, maybe a tinge of blue for this barren moon, and let's just do it. This is the fun part.
It's just like making a potion when you're 8.
It's exactly like making a potion. That's why it's so fun. Comment in the comments below if you used to make potions when you were a little kid, just like mixing random stuff together, and yeah. So sand and sawdust are fantastic. You can get them for free from a lot of different places, but they're also extremely cheap from hardware stores. If you know anyone who works with timber, woodworking, they're likely to have buckets of sawdust lying around, or at least if you ask, they'll probably be able to collect some for you. And it makes for fantastic texture. Just patting the tiles down gives a really nice texture. It's gonna give us some nice ridges we can dry brush later, which is going to make all of this really pop.
Also lets it know it's a good boy.
Also good to make sure your board knows it's a good boy. Look, we have some painting to do left, but I have to say, well done. We also have Jen's crystals to bring in, and I think spread across the board, that's gonna look fantastic. Murray, your little rock pillars, your maces, what? Cans, they look awesome. And overall, I think this is a really cool foundation. And we've done this in like 3 hours, 4 hours.
Yeah, and we're under budget. We are.
Hopefully. We'll let the editor tally that one up. So we're gonna leave these to dry, and then we'll do some painting, some dry brushing, get some base tones in there, and yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Take it to the finish.
Woo.
So we're up to my favorite part in this project. We're going to dry brush this entire board and give it a little bit of color. And Murray has suggested that we use yellow, which is very interesting. I would have not picked to use yellow, but I'm gonna trust Murray. He's a very good painter and he knows his color theory. So we're gonna go with yellow. So let's get started with some dry brushing.
To add a little bit of variety to the board, I'm going to be dry brushing some Glacier Blue onto all of the raised surfaces and then in a few little patches. And then I'm going to dry brush Magenta into all of the areas that we're going to put those crystals Jen's made. Dry brushing is so fun and easy. Oh yeah, and this is just a really cheap makeup brush. That's all.
So I have my crystals in this little container and I want to try and do this the easiest way possible, and I have no idea if it's going to work. Hopefully it will. Let's go around and find out. So what I'm going to do is add some paint into here along with a little bit of water and give it a really good mixy mix, and then put it on the paper towel to dry, and hopefully it works. I think it's going to save me so much time and having to hand paint these all individually. So do it.
So it's come time to glue Jen's crystals onto the board. And to do this, we're going to be using a different glue technique. And this one came to me via Miscast. One of his videos talks about using baking soda or bicarb soda as a super glue accelerant and gap filler. One of the problems with this method, while being extremely cheap, quick and easy, is that it leaves a lot of this powdered white thick residue. And when I visualize crystal clusters, I often think of that white granulated powder-like crystal down the bottom of the structure. So I reckon this is actually going to be a really good technique to emulate that, but let's find out by doing. So the board is almost finished, but what comes next is me painting these little foundations I've left around the place. Now, I can't paint them in a way that feels too sci-fi or too fantasy because then it loses its multi-purpose nature. So I'm just gonna paint them like some generic stone, starting with a khaki into a bone to put some brown undertones into the board that will contrast nicely with the darker gray and yellow stone, but then bringing it up to a more of a gray highlight to really differentiate it from the rest of the board. And I'm gonna use sponges because I love sponges. They look so good. As you all know, we wouldn't be here without our patrons, and we'd like to thank the newest patrons for joining the gang and joining that mini Discord. Roachster34, Puelo, Bobbles, Raptor Shadow, Richard Jerris, Botaniac, Lord Frostfinger, Tanielle, and Molly Leese. Look forward to saying hi to you in the Discord or seeing your submissions in mini review. And if you'd like to join, links are in the description.
And it's all done, yay! It looks so good. For a really like basic board for cheap and in a short period of time, I reckon we've done an excellent job.
I think we hit the nail on the head. Under $100 US and 1 day of working time to create a modular gaming board that you could use for any game system. I'm really happy with this. It's come together well. The little pop of the magenta crystals was totally worth it. It pulled it all together at the end. And you can see, we just put some terrain on here to just show that like these little foundations let you put on some, you know, buildings and it just works.
Yeah, the texture, I think as well, doing that for really cheap too, just gave you a really good way to give texture to the board. I think it worked really, really well. And it stayed on too. I was really worried it might chip off, but no, it stayed. It was really good.
So thank you for watching. And once again, make sure you check out the link to our Kickstarter down below. That will really, really support the channel and help us keep going, keep making videos, and also make some cool new minis in a new universe we're hoping to create. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you in the next one. Place and my passion, forklift simulator. See ya fucking later. Might be my dad.